Repairing telephone lines damaged by Japanese shells is Montrealer George Blackie Verreau.
We are all on Hong Kong Island now. We were told that we can hold our position for some 100 days. This darn artillery keeps hammering at us. They're preparing a surprise for us. Only one direct hit to make me a has-been. Just the same, we hang in. The Japs are now half a mile away with only the water separating us.
By December 13th, the Japanese had total control of the mainland, and in fact, this was their front line. The only thing between them and Hong Kong Island, of course, was the channel. The Japanese decided to make an attempt, or a gamble, on the night of December 18th, 1941. And in small boats, they came across the Limong Passage, which is here, only 500 meters wide, and they completely took the Allies by surprise.
Leading thousands of troops in one of the first waves of the Japanese attack is Colonel Teshichi Doi.
It was a spectacular and grim crossing. Time and again the water was lighted as brilliantly as broad daylight by the fire of burning heavy oil in the storage tanks on the opposite shore. Streams of enemy machine gun fire from the opposite shore slowed the boats. The only alternative under the circumstances was for the men reaching the shore on the same assault boat to charge into the immediate enemy and move inland as fast as we could. This our soldiers did.
One of the frontline Canadian soldiers trying to hold off the massive Japanese assault is a 20-year-old rifleman, Sidney Skelton, of the Royal Rifles of Canada.
Men in khaki jackets, breeches and puttees, helmets bearing the single star, long bayonets, automatic weapons. Some of them threw themselves on the barbed wire while others streamed over the human bridges. We were on the high ground and we really peppered them. My bren was hot, but they kept coming. I thought, Jesus, there's no end to them.
Within hours, in desperate fighting, the Japanese cut through the first lines of defense. The Japanese plan is to seize the hills in the northeast corner of the island. Saiwan Hill, Mount Butler, and Mount Parker, and plunge into the Wong Ni Chong Gap, the narrow valley that divides the island in two.
The success of the Japanese invasion depended on them seizing the heights, here at Saiwan and Mount Parker over there. And this they did very, very quickly. Now, the Allies, to have any chance at all in this battle, had to push them off. And it was during these counterattacks that the 1st Canadians of the Royal Regiment of Canada were killed in action here at Saiwan.
A spirit of madness took over, gobbling up everything: earth, bodies, guns. My friend Tommy Marsh fought desperately in the hills behind our pillboxes, where platoons were being slaughtered. He caught a bullet through his throat and jaw, and was blown up by shell fire.
As the Canadians fight to recapture the hills, the Japanese push inland, heading for the Wong Ni Chong Gap. Coming to the aid of wounded Canadians is a 20-year-old rifleman with the Royal Rifles of Canada, Alfred Babin.
When the Japanese first came, and that's when I started to drive an ambulance. We had several casualties that needed the attention of the main hospital, so there were 4 of them that they put on stretchers and put it in the ambulance I was driving. I went around a curve and the ambulance was fired upon, and the windshield was shattered. So I decided to check on the people in the vehicle and see how they were. The bullets, when they hit the cab, they slowed down and they ricocheted around the inside of the cab. And one fellow, I guess it went just underneath his nose. He passed on, I guess, because of the excessive bleeding. Because I couldn't do anything at the time. The problem was to get out of there.
The speed of the Japanese advance surprises Hong Kong's high command. It's been only 12 hours since the Japanese invaded the island, and in that short time, they have seized the heights in the northeast of the island and are now poised to capture the Wong Ni Chong Gap and cut the island of Hong Kong in two.
This is Jardine's Lookout, one of the critical defensive positions defending Hong Kong Island. After the Japanese landing, the Japanese had come inland so quickly that although this was a secondary position, it was already coming under attack. Up here we have one of the bunkers used to defend the lookout. This one obviously saw a lot of action. You can actually see the bullet holes in this area here, and you can see at the top, for example, how intact this one is, because there's the observation tower, and you can actually see the ventilation shafts in here. They would have been manned by probably 15 to 20 men with machine guns, and these were crucial to stopping the Japanese as they invaded.
As the Japanese swarm up the heights, they quickly overcome the front-line pillboxes and defenses on Mount Butler and Mount Barker. Now, with their communications down and not knowing where the Japanese are, the High Command sends in small groups of soldiers to try to stem the Japanese advance and retake the high ground.
The first 12 hours of the Japanese invasion had gone so well for the Japanese that it had thrown the Allied defenses into total chaos. They really had no idea where the Japanese were, but they knew they were coming fast. So what they decided to do was send A Company, which is about 150 men, of the Winnipeg Grenadiers, including John Osborne, up this direction, past this pillbox, to push the Japanese off Jardine's Lookout and recapture Mount Butler.
Leading A Company in the attack is one of Seaforce's few experienced soldiers, a 42-year-old veteran of World War I and a father of two from Winnipeg, Company Sergeant Major John Osborne. Moving through the jungle with Osborne's company is 19-year-old Private Cliff Matthews.
I saw a Japanese soldier about 150 yards away creeping through the long grass towards us. I shot him. Seconds later, a bullet struck me, entering near my left collarbone and exiting out the back of my shoulder, effectively paralyzing my left arm.
A Company's counterattack took place over here on Jardine's Lookout, and they very quickly drove the Japanese off these heights here and advanced down the hill towards Mount Butler over there. When they reached Mount Butler, they were attacked by a large Japanese force, and they were forced to retreat. And as you can see by the terrain, it's very cut and very rough, and they're broken into small groups as they tried to make their way back up to Jardine's Lookout. On these little spurs here, they put up a very strong defensive fight, and it was here that Company Sergeant Major John Osborne won his Victoria Cross, over there.
All of a sudden, Japs appeared and an officer started waving a sword at us, implying that we should surrender. Stan Stodge responded by shooting and killing the Japanese officer. A barrage of grenades and mortars followed. Sergeant Major Osborne was about 20 feet away from me. I saw something land near. I dropped to the ground and covered my head. The explosion lifted me right off the ground. When I looked up, Osborne was gone, but the guys farther up the hill said that he had thrown himself on the mortar, probably saving my life.
A Company's counterattack fails, and by dawn on December 19th, the Japanese hold the western slopes of Jardine's Lookout, overlooking Wong Ni Chong Gap, the valley that divides the island in two.
This is the Wong Ni Chong Gap. It's really a valley between Mount Nicholson on the west and Jardine's Lookout on the east. It was one of the most important strategic positions on the island, and of course it was also a center of the Japanese attack. Unfortunately for John Lawson, it is also where his headquarters were.
Brigadier John Lawson, commander of the Canadians, now heads West Brigade. He and his command bunker lie at the center of the defense of Hong Kong.
This is the West Brigade command bunker, and the man commanding West Brigade was the Canadian officer Brigadier John Lawson. This is also where all their communications would have been, and this is where they would have found out about the Japanese attack. But it didn't take very long before Lawson would find out about it himself, because by 7 o'clock in the morning on December 19th, Japanese bullets were already ricocheting off this bunker, and you can actually see some of the holes here. By 10 o'clock in the morning, Japanese fire had become so severe, and obviously they had so many men on the slopes of Jardines Lookout, that Lawson felt he had to try to make a break for it. At 10 a.m., he sends out his last communique that he's going to fight it out, and he makes a run for it.
Manning a machine gun not far from the bunker is Sergeant Bob Manchester.
I was manning a gun not far away and saw Lawson and 3 others run from the bunker and start up the hill. A Japanese machine gun firing at us suddenly switched over to them. They were shot down like 10 pins, like clay ducks.
Lawson and his staff got about 50 feet from the command bunker when they were caught in a hail of machine gun fire. Half the men, including Lawson, went down right in this position here. In fact, Lawson's body was found right here after the war, and it was exhumed, moved to Saiwan War Cemetery. But the tragedy wasn't only that Lawson was killed, it was that the battle was at its most crucial phase and West Brigade was leaderless.
With Lawson dead and the command bunker captured, coordinated defense in the western half of the island breaks down. Now the men fight desperate, piecemeal actions.
One of the most courageous actions of the Battle of Hong Kong took place over on that tennis court. But in 1941, it wasn't a tennis court, it was the command bunker of the Winnipeg Grenadiers. Throughout December 19th and 20th, the Japanese infiltrated this area and surrounded that position. And the men inside literally fought off counterattack after counterattack and held their position for 4 days, even though they couldn't be reinforced. And it wasn't until they ran out of ammunition and all the men were wounded that they finally surrendered. I consider that to be the most heroic action in the entire battle.
Small units are ordered to attack over Mount Nicholson and to try to relieve the men surrounded by the enemy and trapped in the Wong Ni Chong Gap. Sergeant Ed Shaler of the Winnipeg Grenadiers is with them.
We knew they were in trouble, but what we didn't know was that they'd been virtually wiped out. Grenades were landing all around us, and bullets. The Japanese were sometimes about 50 feet away. One of them came running at me with a sword, waving it in the air, which was a pretty stupid thing to do. The Japanese with the sword didn't get very far. There was no quarter given and none expected. We never did get anywhere near the men in the Wong Ni Chong Gap.
As small, scattered groups of troops plunge into separate fights in the hills, trying to relieve the Wong Ni Chong Gap, dozens are killed and scores taken prisoner.